Yes, we're back with the Open Line Radio Show here on 88.3 KIEE FM, your superstation. One thing, the staff and management of Southern Development, Mr. Charles and Mr. John Freeman for helping facilitating these shows. And again, we appreciate AOC Community Media, that's Cox 15 and Cable, and LUS Fiber in Lafayette and the Five Parish area. So we're reaching a wide audience in South Louisiana, from Morgan City to Opelousas, all in five, and also the Five Parish area on cable TV. We have none other and better affectionately known as Uncle Bobby, Brother Cephus X Johnson. You remember the movie Fruitville Station? You remember the issue with his nephew, Oscar Grant, who was shot down in cold blood in Oakland, California. We have Brother Cephus on the line. He's an advocate for all this different situation with law enforcement over the years, and he never gave up. We appreciate him coming on the Open Line Radio Show. Good morning, Brother Cephus. Uncle Bobby.
Yeah, good morning to you and all your listeners. Yes.
Yes, my brother, and I know love, not blood, it should be the theme in all aspects, not just with law enforcement issues that we have, but also with how we relate to each other. We were just talking about the senseless violence we had in our community, a small area, rural area, and we having gun violence off the chain every day, Brother Cephus.
Yeah, so our organization name, of course, is Love Not Blood Campaign.
Oh, right.
Of course, you know, we specifically work with families that has been impacted by police violence.
Right.
However, we do also engage and work with families that have experienced, sadly, our communal violence that occurs in our own communities. Mm-hmm. But yes, of course, the idea is to bring more love rather than blood.
Right.
You know, so that's our campaign. Yes.
Yes, and you're in, I mean, you've been a guest down here in South Louisiana, and also we met up at the Ronald Green rally in Baton Rouge on last year. Still very unsatisfied with the response we're getting from law enforcement and governmental officials. And, brother, what brings you to Chicago? I've heard it was the rally for Sister Sandra Massey. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it's actually Sonia.
Yes, Sonia. My co-host, Sister Khadija, who's not here, shout out to her. She always corrected me on that, man. I'm glad you're doing that.
Yeah, you know, and it's important that we make sure we get their names right. And we also see these Black women that are being killed by this racist policing system that we have. Many, like Sonia, has been killed in their home. Mm-hmm. You know, Breonna Taylor is one of the most recent examples, killed in her home. You know, Corin Gaines, killed in her home. We could go on with the names of these Black women, you know, that call for help. These officers shows up, and then as we witnessed with Sonia Massey, Breonna Taylor, and others, they end up killing them. So, yes, I was in Chicago, or still in Chicago, I'm leaving out today, in support of Sonia Massey and a rally that they had in Mount Pilgrim Church here in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Sonia Massey, as you know, was killed in Springfield, Illinois. You know, and so, you know, sadly, you know, when Oscar was murdered on January 1st, 2009, you know, and maybe I give a quick backdrop for listeners who might be even asking the question, who was Oscar Grant? Well, on January 1st, 2009 in Oakland, California, my nephew, Oscar Grant, was thrown to the platform floor. A 270-pound officer was on his back. Tony Peroni was 6'2", 250 pounds. He had his knee on Oscar's neck, just like that same knee that was on George Floyd's neck. He was pushing Oscar's face with that knee on his neck through the concrete floor, cracking the bones in his face. And Oscar was telling him, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." Johannes Mesley, who was 6'7", 270 pounds, on his back, decides to stand up, pull out his service revolver or his gun, shoots Oscar in the back. The bullet travels through his body, hit the concrete floor, comes back up, and of course penetrates his chest, collapse of lung, but he dies from that single wound. Actually, it was 2 wounds, one in the back and then one in the front. He dies from that. It was caught on video, and that's what made our case so significant, because it was the first time that cell phone video actually showed the egregious act of these racist police officers, and how we've been saying for years that they are doing this. Now we got it on video. And so, of course, with the community outcry, and expressing their anger concerning the murder of Oscar Grant, the embrace of the community of us, the love that they showed, standing with us, crying with us, going back and forth to court with us, but most importantly, shouting out that I am Oscar Grant. We were able to get, for the first time in California state history, an officer arrested, charged, convicted, and sent to jail. We counted more of a historical mark in time because he only did 11 months.
Right.
He should have been in jail at a minimum of 14 years, but he only did 11 months, so he was out. And that was because the judge protected him. That's our story. And from that pain, we've been working with families ever since, because right after Mesley was convicted, Derek Jones was killed in Oakland. And I can remember embracing that father and that mother, and they both were senior to me, and they cried in my arms. And it was so impactful that, I made it a point, God's willing, that I can embrace every possible family that I can, just love on, to help have an opportunity to stand, to begin to articulate the justice that they want for their loved one. And so that's been our journey. I still do that today. So I was here in Chicago in support of Sonia Massey and her family. Of course, I did get to meet the father, James Wilburn, and of course, the family, the children. It's been painful. Sadly, it's still happening. I'm believing and hoping, it could go either way. That I rebuke you, Satan, in the name of Jesus, is an outcry to our Christian folks that, this battle is not against that flesh and blood, but against those principalities and those wickedness in high places. And she's not the only one that called on the Lord and was murdered. There's been others that has called on the Lord. So that's telling us that there is something evil that I believe that I know exists within the policing agencies, because the way they've been killing us and getting away with it, and the way your governor there is getting ready to set the tone for a new level of brutality to take place, is extremely dangerous. And so we have to be very vigilant and watchful of what's happening in our states and in our communities, because ultimately it's going to hit us nationally, and it's going to be a major outcry concerning something that we should have been addressing on the local and state level before it became a national major concern.
And it's the mix we're in, right? Because when I opened the show, I talked about we had some more senseless gun violence by the youth in the community, but we also had another tragedy where a local Lafayette City police officer was part of a SWAT team. He was serving a warrant, and he got shot, and he was well liked by the community. And I say, easy access to guns in Louisiana pushed that whole idea, and I know it's not the subject matter, but that is the violent nature of America. Guns solves all the problem. If you don't like somebody, just shoot them. Let me go into this thing right here, and the callousness of law enforcement all over, not just with the case of Sonia Massey. The issue when law enforcement initially get reports there was a shooting that might have been questionable. They lie with impunity. They put out reports initially with Sonia. It was that she might have committed suicide or something she did caused the officer to shoot her. The lies, and that is not just on the perpetrator, whether it was the Grayson guy or it's those who are the supervisors who put out those stories. That's what we have to look at. We got to look at these police unions that have so much power, political power over local elected officials. We got to look at those things. They are the one, the catalyst to practice of what we should do when we have a case like that. What's your opinion on that? I know I brought up a lot right there.
Right, right. So, I mean, ultimately, what you said is an issue. And one of the ways that we have begin to address it in the state of California, and it's not as progressive as most people believe, but we've been putting in the work, is in 2015, we passed a piece of legislation called AB 71, which is the use of force, DOJ use of force collection. Because we have been announcing and saying that X number of black folks are being killed per year, but no one was taking any real data. You know, the FBI had their own crime statistics and collecting the data, but it was so underreported. But anyway, so when the DOJ began to collect that data, we saw how egregious the act of police violence was in the state of California in killings. You know, because we averaged since that time 175 to 225 California civilians being killed by the police. All right. And then we got, of course, we break down that data. But right after that, we got AB 953 passed, which was the Racial Identification Profiling Act, because we wanted to know who was being stopped and why they were being stopped, right? The demographics was really important. And that gave us another insight. So then we argued in 2018 for SB 1421, the right to know, so we could begin to try to inspect officers' personal folders to be more proactive in making sure we get rid of these bad acting officers. And I'll pin it right there just to backtrack quickly. Johannes Misley, who killed my nephew, Oscar Grant, had 9 complaints filed against him within a 2-year time period before he murdered Oscar Grant. The officer that killed Sonia Massey, as you know, had been discharged from the military for an egregious act, had transferred from 6 police departments before he killed Sonia Massey. So that's what 1421 we were looking at to address. And then we passed, when that happened, the agencies in the state of California began to start burning historical records. So we were able to pass SB 16 to include an expansion to begin to stop this, hiding this information. Of course, we came back with and I'm giving this backdrop because this is part of the way we've been dealing with trying to minimize the killing in some degrees, but also being continuously arguing for the changes to take place. But we passed AB 392, the stuff on Clark Law, the young man that was killed in his grandmama's backyard. And that was the strictest use of force legislation passed in the nation, because we incorporated the necessary. The stated way is what a reasonable officer would have done under the same circumstances. Well, we made it now where there's a requirement what the necessary steps before this violence takes place. And we've now gotten more officers arrested and charged and being convicted for unnecessary murders. You know, all of them used to be justified homicide. But this last part is we passed, and it's been many more, but SB 2, which is decertification legislation. I was a part of the group. We was able to get that passed with our Senator Stephen Bradford. After we got that passed, you know, because we set up a board, Gavin Newsom appointed me to the board. So now, you know, I've been blessed to not only argue for various forms of legislation to be passed, but also to be able to sit on the board to sit in a position to be able to get rid of these rogue police officers that have committed an egregious act, meaning they are decertified. Right. So when an officer is decertified in the state of California, they can no longer be employed in the state of California. They also go into the National Decertification Index database. The loophole is that we don't have federal regulation that requires every agency in the country to comb that database before they hire them. Right. So they could still slip through the cracks. So we just got to continue to plug up these holes. And that, had we had done something about that officer that killed Sonia Massey would still be living today, because he had a history, you know. And so when we talk about what is it that we could do and the things that we could do, we can begin to identify and bring into existence legislation and laws that will prohibit these officers from continuing to brutalize our communities and then go to another community and do the same thing.
There you go.
You know, so we got work on our hands. Your governor is really getting ready to set a tone. You know, and I say this, that right now, to my knowledge, is unheard of, where he's looking at bringing in qualified immunity so that police officers can't even be sued in civil court. You know, and you know, that's a bad sign.
That is crazy. And you mentioned officers leaving jurisdiction after being convicted. And here's how crazy it is. You had a law enforcement with the Iberia Parish Sheriff Department who committed a somewhat a brutal act on camera, caught on camera, was fired, pled guilty in federal court. And he was later on, a couple of years later, hired at another local jurisdiction. People who know what I'm talking about, it's in same city of St. Martinville, Louisiana, smaller town, where Jeff Landry is from, the governor is from that area, and he's now the assistant chief. Somebody who committed a crime on camera, brutalized and handcuffed suspects, and now he's the assistant chief in another jurisdiction. How crazy is that?
And that's what keeps the culture sick. Having someone like that in leadership that have committed that egregious act and now is heading a department of officers, and when they commit that egregious act, of course, he co-signs it all.
Yes.
You know, so that's what we're dealing with, you know, and so, you know, we got work on our hands, but I think more importantly, we as Black men now really must begin to think about how we're going to really protect our Black women.
Yes.
You know, because as we can see, so many crimes are being perpetrated against our queens that we now must really, sadly, not sadly, but really take these matters in our own hand and become the real protectors of our Black women. You know, because the system's not going to do it, you know, and of course our sisters are fighting for their lives, because so many of them today has become district attorneys. Right. You see what I'm saying? Because there was a time period where that was straight a white man's job, and they was putting us in jail left and right. Now we got sisters that are district attorneys coming with that compassion and changing the whole game in that respect, and they're being attacked. You know, but, you know, we got work on our hands.
There's much talk about the law enforcement aspect of Project 2025 and Agenda 47. But, you know, I got news for the people of Louisiana. Jeff Landry has almost enacted half of that through his legislative body with people like, and we notice, you know, when I call names, I'm referencing to people who voted for things against you, the betterment of your community. State Senator Blake Miguez, who some in the Black community have aligned themselves with politically, was the governor's lieutenant point man on pushing these legislation with the gun laws and things like that. But yet we don't get it. We can't keep aligning ourselves with people who have political beliefs opposite to our existence that are going to affect our existence in a very negative way. And we you know, and our people just don't get it on that. Once you pass legislation similar to what's happening with Agenda 2047, go read it, people, or Project 2025, and we know the master, one of the masters of Project 2025 hails from Lafayette, Louisiana, the very city I am broadcasting from. We have all of these extremist right-wing agenda people, but our people are asleep at the wheel, not realizing that the legislation that they want to put forward going to be detrimental to you, your children, and your children's future.
Right. And I'm definitely in agreement. I saw one that your governor was bringing into place. They dropping the age to 17, where a young man now can be charged as an adult. You know, so they just unraveling everything that we've been fighting for in the 60s and the 70s. You know, so we got to really pay attention and make sure that some of these characters are not in place to bring into reality these harsh elements.
And Uncle Bobby, like again, I say you're in there in Chicago in support of Sonia Massey, and I want to also just ask you briefly, uh, to give people reference, because you know sometimes our people, and I'm not criticizing, we love the shiny object. And tell us a little bit more about the movie Fruitvale Station. Esteemed director
Ryan Coogler.
Ryan Coogler. I got it right. Coogler came up with, also the director and producer of Black Panther. How did you guys come up with that concept of the movie Fruitvale Station?
Well, I'll tell you. So, of course,
briefly,
you know, Oscar.
if you can, you know.
Yeah. So, of course, Oscar was murdered, and various people came with the idea about doing some kind of movie, and we weren't really feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, at one point, even Forrest Whitaker had called and said he had a young man for us to meet, but you know, my sister, the family, we weren't ready to meet him because we were so engrossed in this fight to get justice for Oscar. Mm-hmm. As that was winding down, an officer was convicted. He only did 11 months. Forrest Whitaker said, "You guys think you can meet Ryan, this young man that I'd like for you to have a conversation with?" And we met Ryan. And Ryan, when he shared with us, he wanted to share the love of Oscar, what love Oscar had from his family, his community, his friends, his daughter. You know, he talked about love. And so we bought it. And he said it wouldn't really highlight what really happened to him, you know, but a small piece of it, you know, sadly would show what happened at the end to him. So as you know, the movie didn't really focus on the uprise of the anger of the community and seeking justice for Oscar. It highlighted how Oscar was loved by his daughter, how Oscar was loved by his community, how Oscar had a loving spirit. You know what I'm saying? So that's what drew people in there. So Ryan, when he pitched that to us, we bought it. We said, let's do it. And of course, nobody wanted to really provide the funds for the movie. So Forrest Whitaker had to go over to, I believe it was China, to get basically $900,000 to see if he could produce this movie. And of course, it became the grand jury award at the Sundance Film Festival. Right. It really touched everybody's heart because it spoke to the relationship of what you had with Oscar in the movie. And he was so close to you in the movie that you felt the pain when he was murdered, like we felt. You know, it would still bring tears to my eyes if I watched that movie because Michael B. Jordan, in his breakout movie, he really internalized who Oscar was and played it to perfection. And of course, Ryan Coogler, with the idea behind what he wanted to show, birthed him and Michael B. Jordan to stardom. You know, that's where they really got their footing to go on to bigger stages. Of course, Ryan, as you know, did Creed, eventually Black Panther, and Michael B. Jordan just been blown up ever since. Yeah. You know, and so, you know, the concept was to share the love. As you know, our organization is called Love Not Blood. But, you know, if we learn to just love on each other, it's that love that's going to help us not have to worry about somebody harming you, because now we have really found love within each other. You know, and so that's an important aspect of what we have to build within our own communities. You know, the system by design has have us pitting against each other because of the conditions, the degradation, and the homelessness, the unhoused, you know what I'm saying, the unemployment. So we're caught up in a community that is trying to survive. And sometimes, sadly, we'll do whatever it takes to be able to feed our family. You know, and like you talked about earlier, the guns in the communities, you know, we don't make a gun at all, as you know. And these guns is like plentiful within our community. Where are they coming from?
Yeah.
You know, and so we getting our hands on them.
Right.
And we're doing what we have to do to try to survive in our own community. Not that I condone it, but we understand it. Like Martin Luther King said, you know, that's the voice of the unheard. When he went up to Chicago and in one of his speeches, and he said he met the brothers that was talking about throwing Molotov cocktails, right? And they said to him, hey, the greatest purveyor of violence is the United States. Now, how are you going to come here telling us what we shouldn't do when they're doing it? And that's when he realized that that's the voice of, you know, those that is not heard, but is in a lot of pain.
Yes, and lastly, also the move to criminalize protests across the United States, not only again through Project 2025 and Agenda 47 Trump. And locally here in the state of Louisiana, there's a lot of movement. Some of the legislation speaks to that. I haven't delved into it any further, but hopefully, Brother Cephus, we could somewhat not be swayed when we have an issue with government and law enforcement. You know, that's the worry with some.
Right. You know, I was just right after we had our 10+5 year gala, which really is 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
5 years. We ran the Oscar Grant Foundation. Then in the last 10 years, we've been doing a Love Not Blood campaign.
Mm-hmm.
I was invited up to be a keynote speaker for AB 481, which is the militarization legislation that we passed. And that is, you know, the police agencies, especially in the state of California, are purchasing, not just in the California, but especially in California, are purchasing all this military equipment. You know, they have drones, helicopters, tanks, bobcats, you know, you name it,
Right.
all this military gear. And then they using that in order to do better crowd control. You know, so our legislation that we passed in 41 was um, to prevent them from continually to purchase that stuff, but not only that, to report to us what's being purchased, how it's being used, you know, and you know the purpose of, and the reason why they even want to purchase it. Uh, but you know the system is fighting against the legislation and is hiding and finding new ways to get that stuff without us knowing about it. And so, you know,
Yeah.
I'm saying all that to say it's just so much work we got to
Yes.
do
So
on
much.
all ends.
And
Yeah, on all ends.
and thank God for people like you, my brother. Man, if it wasn't for you to inspire people, or especially I followed the Oscar Grant story from the inception of the issues that was surrounding his death, and it was hurtful back then. Each death is hurtful. You know, Ronald Green, and you know the story of Ronald Green and meeting
Yes.
his mother and see the pain and the struggle, and you met her too, and I know you've seen it.
Yes. You know, I said shared it. And on January 1st, 2009, Oscar Grant was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
Adolph Grimes of New Orleans, as you know, was also murdered.
Right.
And what was his name? Robbie Tolan out
Right.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
He was
All three of them
rough
were
up.
shot.
Yeah. He was rough.
Yeah,
His family, him and his mother was roughed up. Yeah.
right. Exactly. All three of them were shot in the back. All three were 22 years old, um, all within 8 hours of each other
Right.
on the same night.
Yeah.
Or you know,
Right.
one was a little earlier than the other, but it was all within 8 hours.
Right.
And as you know, Oakland caught on fire behind Oscar Grant.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, not Robbie Tolan, but Adolph Grimes' family finally just got to civil court, what, about 3 years ago,
Yeah.
4 years ago? I mean, after all them years, so they didn't have a whole lot of support, you know. And then Robbie Tolan,
Mm-hmm.
because they was in a gated community, you know, did well. Uh, they also didn't really have a whole lot of
Right.
support, but they did go to the Fifth Circuit of Appeal. They was able to get it remanded back down to the district courts, and then eventually Robbie was so tired he just decided that
Yeah.
they didn't need to pursue anymore concerning the fact of what happened to him. I'm just saying all that to say, you know, Oakland went up in flames, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and the Longshoremen Union shut down the ports on the West Coast. The community was outraged.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and somehow, I think because of those elements and others, we were able to get the officer arrested, charged, convicted. Now, we didn't get him sitting for a long time, but he was arrested and convicted. The officers that killed Adolph Grimes were never charged. Uh, you know, and of course, I wasn't in New Orleans at the time, and I was focused on Oscar. But I used that as a measuring stick to try to understand what happened. And sadly, Louisiana didn't go up in flames, nor did a lot of people even recognize what happened to Adolph Grimes, you know, to the degree that it did happen in Oakland. And because Robbie Tolan in there was in a gated community, there was much more trust on the system to work, and it failed. So, you know, all three is a representation of various ways things can happen when we experience this egregious act. You know, so we just need to know how to move when these things occur and what we should do. We know we got to bring our Christian folks out, and this is what I'm hoping Sonia Massey does. We got to have labor involved, because there's things we could do on the labor side that can help impact this criminal justice system. You know, we definitely need the community involved, because if we don't show up, you know, the officers are just going to get off.
Right.
So the more eyes on the case, the better we are in the long run, because people are outraged. And plus, no city wants to have the idea of smelling smoke anyway. You know, and so we can't control how people act or how they display their anger. But the most important thing is that we respond to this egregious act. And some of us is going to simply be through voting. Some of us is going to simply be through praying. Some of us is going to simply be out there in the streets with the protest. And then we got those that are willing to risk their lives by throwing a brick through a window. You know, so whatever God is giving you to do, that's what you do, because it's a lot of moving parts. But all the parts work together to bring about the ultimate goal, which is real justice.
Okay. Well, and Brother Cephus, tell us how we could get in contact with your organization.
Yes. So our website is www.lovenotbloodcampaign.com. That's our website. Again, www.lovenotbloodcampaign.com. You know, of course, the number to be reached at is 510-706-7558. You know, when we work with impacted families of police violence all over this country, sadly, we have a database of over 1,000 families. You know, but one of the things we do offer to families, sadly, that are brand new, and some families that haven't had an opportunity, is a healing conference that we do every year. We find ways and means to find supporters to help us pay for it, and we bring 200 to 300 families together. We have a networking opportunity. We, of course, have workshops that introduce families to what trauma is and the mental aspect of it and how to deal with it when you're at home and alone. We help families understand the difference between civil and criminal litigation. We help families better articulate their loved one's story. You know, there's various workshops. We have the media aspect. You know, how does Black media play a role in bringing to the essence of what happened to your loved one? You know, we have, you know, most importantly, we have specific workshops for children, especially if you want to bring a granddaughter or a child, you know, someone under 18 that has been impacted by that loved one being murdered, and just need to be around folks that, you know, have had the similar experience. You know, and so we do this once a year. Definitely hit the website, on the website, or call me, and I can send out the information on it. The website will have also the information on there, how to join the network. Joining the network is how we build up the database for emails to go out to you, so you can be brought to awareness of the work that we're doing and how you can be a part of it. So that, especially if you're a family that's been impacted and you think you're alone, this is happening all over this country. And if you have a network of families that you know, then it helps you deal with the situation. The pain will never go away, but it helps you be able to deal with it better. And we bounce things off of each other that helps us understand various things that are happening in different states, what states things work and what state things don't work. You know, and so it's a lot, a great benefit to connect with those that have suffered the same type of pain so that you can understand your journey.
Yes. Okay. Man, I want to thank you so much. And again, people, if you want to reach out, he gave you the information. Also, just contact me here at the station. I'll give you the information. That's a brother. I'm going to tell y'all, that's a brother who answers the phone. You know, because I place a lot of calls, and I say, brother, if anybody going to answer, it's brothers Cephus, Uncle Bobby.
Wow, thank you for calling me, and
Yes, sir.
and I just share what I share my experience, strength, and hope. Because ultimately I believe we're gonna win.
Yes.
But we got
We
work to
got
do.
the fight is eternal to me. I mean, for
Yeah.
me, seeing you come down there at the Louisiana State Capitol and seeing you, man, you gave me some hope. I said, I know I got some real people ready to help and advocate for the Ronald Green family. Yes, yes, sir.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Uncle Bobby, and I'll be contacting you and sending you info and supporting you.
All right. Thank you too.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
you.
Bye
You're
bye.
welcome. Bye.
There you go, people. You heard from Brother Cephus X Johnson, affectionately known as Uncle Bobby, the uncle of Oscar Grant. You remember the movie Fruitvale Station? Fruitvale Station. Ryan Coogler, producer, director. Great brother, been an advocate. He didn't let any of the connection that he had with Hollywood types go to his head. Matter of fact, they support him and his movement and all the advocating work he's been doing around police accountability. So we got to support brothers like that.